here's the thing with those of us who are spiritually intelligent, the psychics, the oracles, is that unless we are diligently codifying, documenting, what we do is ephemeral.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm here to anchor in new consciousness and new ways of living and working and being, which requires some kind of physical something to represent it.
Yes.
Because when it is in the physical, it's undeniable.
Hello, and welcome back to the Oracle on Purpose podcast, where we talk about all the things that help inspire women founders and entrepreneurs to live a limitless life of purpose and prosperity. I'm excited for my special guest today, Dr. Robyn McKay, who is, what I love about your journey is what I was looking about your journey was that, like myself, actually, you started in psychology. And
Yes.
I think that's really great because, so many of us as entrepreneurs and founders, we go down one path and we think that that's the path that is meant for us. And then something sparks us to either develop a new path or to integrate more of ourselves into what we're doing. And for me, what I saw about what you're up to and what you're doing is that you're doing just that. You're bringing all of yourself to your work and to the world. And that is something I think is really inspiring to people from all walks of life. So tell me, Dr. Robyn, what was it that first brought you into this more holistic path, if you will, of the work you're doing today?
Oh my goodness. Thank you for having me, first of all.
You're so welcome.
I had a quarter life crisis. And at the time, I was working in biotech at an undergrad in biology. I was driving 45 minutes to work every single day, each way in Kansas City. I'd stop at the Quick Trip and get Krispy Kreme donuts and a Diet Coke on the way. That was my idea of self-care. And meanwhile, I was also mentoring young women who were studying STEM fields as well. And I knew at that point that I couldn't continue working in a biosafety 3 lab with dangerous microorganisms, not to mention that I had to wear like scrubs and safety glasses, like, my vibe. Like, I'm like, that is so not me.
Does not seem like you. No.
But
Yes.
at the time, I'm in Gen X, and at the time we were all mapped into, if you were a smart girl, you better go into science or medicine or something. I didn't get into medical school, and that's how I found my way into biotech. It was a blessing after all, because of course I got to start mentoring these young women, and that's really where I found my way into psychology. Psychology had always been a whisper in my ear.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I want to tell you this because you're an oracle, you'll get this. I was at a College of St. Mary's in Omaha, and I was standing in front of the Blessed Virgin Mary statue. My family is Catholic. And I've always had a beautiful connection with her. And I was just standing there, and I heard this whisper in my ear, you need to go into psychology. And that was when I was like 20. So it took me until I was 32 to finally land the plane on, I have to get my PhD in psychology. And that is really what that quarter life crisis created the conditions for me. By the way, the quarter life crisis also happened to be, is it Saturn's return?
Yes.
28 years. Yeah. I didn't know that at the time, but it all kind of like, as I look back on my life, I'm like, oh, of course that would have happened. And at that time, I also knew I was always intuitive. That was just a part of how my family, I grew up with a family who we'd have telepathic conversations all the time and not have a name for it. We would just be having these silent conversations until somebody would say something out loud, and we'd be like, oh, we just had a whole thing, and everyone knew what we were talking about.
Right.
So that's the family that I came from. And also very Catholic, and always working with the angels and the saints and so on. And one of my earliest memories was my mom teaching me the Angel of God prayer. And at that moment, that was something that activated in me. And I could feel the Archangel Michael with me from that moment on. I never had a worry or concern about being alone, really.
Beautiful.
So 28, I have my quarter life crisis. I get back into graduate school. I start studying for my PhD. Meanwhile, I'm doing what would turn out to be about a 7-year apprenticeship in spiritual intelligence as well. So even then, as a scientist coming out of biotech and knowing scientific method, and then having these spiritual experiences, I already started integrating the science and the spirit.
Right.
And the reason and the intuition. In fact, my PhD one of my major contributions during my PhD was an article that I co-authored with my advisor and another graduate student on how people make decisions. My contribution, guess what it was? Intuition.
Intuition. Exactly.
Yeah. So even back then in, the early 2000s, that's what I was working on. And I had a teacher say to me once, as she was trying to understand what I was doing, she said, well, I do guess research is me search. So now we know the secret, right?
Research is me search.
Research is me search.
Yes.
All the way back then, I was studying the oracles and the channels like Abraham Hicks and because I really wanted to understand that. And I don't know if you remember that guy who was John Edwards would talk to the dead
John
people?
Edwards, yes.
I would watch him and I'm like, I can do that. Why am I not doing that? And that actually started coming up in my training as a psychologist. I'm in therapy sometimes and I would have the dead people come in. What do you do with that when you're a therapist and you're supposed to be doing like cognitive behavioral stuff? And like you've got the dead people coming in. Like what do you do with that?
Right.
And a lot of times I would have to do it silently. This is when I was still a student. So I was being supervised. Like, I'm not going to put in my notes, oh yeah, in BTW, there was a dead person here. Like, what do you code?
Showed up and
and how do you code that for insurance? Like, so there was a lot of, psychology was close for me.
Right.
And then eventually I kept on studying the spiritual intelligence piece and I kept on understanding like my capabilities, my multidimensional capabilities seem to be a little bit different from the cognitive behavioral model that we were all being taught in school at that time. Mindfulness practices kind of got close to it, but eventually, of course, it's been years ago at this point, but eventually I just moved into developing my own methodology of working with people, of helping them heal from trauma, from burnout. And I'm talking about a lot of accomplished people who can do a lot of things really well, even things they hate, and who actually think about the world in a different way, often are intuitive themselves, but haven't integrated intuition.
Exactly.
What if you could tap into the law of attraction with precision and power on your terms? I'm Leah Dunlap, and in my audiobook, Power Up the Law of Attraction, I give you the no-fluff blueprint to create a life of purpose, prosperity, and peace. Ready to stop manifesting by accident and start creating with intention? Download Power Up the Law of Attraction now on Audible. Now, back to the show.
And that's a key piece you were talking about too, which I want to slow down and have people understand, because I definitely agree with you. Interestingly enough, I had the opposite nudge. I was in psychology.
Oh, yes.
When the Oracle told me to get out.
Literally, like, good job, Oracle.
Yeah,
Thank
she's
you.
like, get out. This is not where you need to be.
Yes.
I can totally understand like that nudge. And I think part of what, as you were saying, that what brought my interest to that was I also had a knowing that at some point these two sides would integrate.
Yes.
Right? We would come. There's a great line from a movie where it says, when science reaches the top of the hill, religion will be there waiting for it.
Oh, it's
spirit will be there waiting for it, right?
Yep.
Because we're going the same place.
I'm pretty sure we're at the top of the hill.
we're so close to the top of the hill right now. And I think that that's a really important part of this is understanding, like you said, so many people, I think, push aside that part of themselves because, as you said for yourself, it was like, okay, so this is the path. And so we have to kind of cut away the other stuff that doesn't feel like the path, even though inherently and maybe even intuitively, we know something more is there.
I mean, I've always looked at my life like a series of stepping stones, and I could never figure out like kids in college who would be like, okay, I'm going to send out my resume to 25 different jobs, and wherever I land. I'm like, that's not how it works for me. Like, I would just know the next thing to do. I thought there was something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, I just had a different way of interacting with the energetics, with the timelines that nobody had words for at that point. And in fact, I think we're still kind of struggling with how to understand what happens with the synchronicities and the serendipities that take place in our lives. And yet, when we acknowledge them, another one opens up, another door opens. And when I go back to, working with accomplished people who want to know what their purpose is, people who are soul seeking or soul searching, we have to go back to, who you are as a person. How do you understand the world and operate from that perspective rather than from what the world tells you how you're supposed to do? Oh, I'm going to open a book and read. I have a story to tell you. So I was celebrating my 9th wedding anniversary with my husband over the weekend. We were up at the Four Seasons here in Scottsdale where we got married. And a young woman in her mid-20s was reading a book on finding your life purpose or something like that. And I'm always attuned to that because that's my background, right? So I ask her about it and she's like, yeah, but it's written by some dude. And I'm like, ugh. So even that, like, we're so hungry for knowledge, for how to, and yet the references that we have out there in tangible form, in book form or podcasts or whatever, oftentimes are going to come from sources that are like that I can't even relate to. He doesn't look like me. He doesn't talk like me. He's a generation ahead of me, whatever it is. Certainly we can learn something from everybody, but somebody like that, like this young woman at the pool, she's like us. And I can see that.
Yes.
And so I have this conversation with her about, well, sweetheart, let's look at this a different way. So those are the moments, those synchronistic moments that we have in our lives that point us, that kind of pull us back into our true north when you feel like you're drifting, for example.
Absolutely. And I think the synchronicities, I've been doing this since 1994 myself.
I love that. You're an OG.
I kind of am.
Wow.
And I think that this is one of my favorite things, is when I think oftentimes we have so many synchronicities that sometimes people don't even acknowledge they're happening.
Oh, I know.
Right. And so to me,
it's just a coincidence.
Yeah, it's just that's my funnest time when I talk to people, is like, it's just like pause, look back. And I mean, clearly the signs are everywhere. But I also think too, like when we look at science, and I started dabbling, I just got really fascinated by quantum physics is my big, like, I can grab a book, read it forever. But one of the things I loved about it was this idea, like you said, of like science looking at these synchronicities and these intuitions and saying there's a fiber behind this.
Spooky action at a
distance.
distance.
Exactly. Yeah. And that, that we can have all of it. We don't have to give up what we have. And so often I think people, women especially, because we have been, like you said, we've grown up in a space where in order to get ahead, you have to check some boxes. Or you're going to get left behind, or you're going to fall prey to an old style of living. And so,
or you have to take remedial masculinity lessons.
Right. You're going to have to,
even now,
you're going to have to fit in some way and make yourself less than to do this. So I know you have an entire environment where you allow people to be all of themselves, all their feminine sides. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, the House of Sheology.
Yes.
Sheology came to me. The name came to me probably about 10 years or so ago. I was working with a branding person, and she gave me a list of names like, naked leadership and, stiletto something and lip suit, whatever. And in the middle of all of this was Sheology. And I was like, of course, there she is. There she is. And so the House of Sheology, which I call my Facebook group, but it's really the ecosystem that I invite accomplished women into, women who are just intelligent, first of all. So figure things out quickly, make sense of things, know what to do about them. That's the definition of intelligence that I like to use. Who are creative, who are intuitive, and who have a grasp on energy as well. That's kind of the thing that differentiates the people who feel really at home in the House of Sheology are the people like you and me, very smart, and also oracles, and maybe they don't have a name for that yet. They're trying to figure out, like, what is this thing that I can do? The healers, the physicians come in and say, well, I look at this surgery that I'm in, and it looks really complicated, and then all of a sudden my hands start doing the thing, and then it's done, and the person is better. Like those kinds of things that they can't explain through science, they come into the House of Sheology, and we talk about spiritual intelligence, and we talk about channeling, and we give name to consciousness. Because I've shared this, I've been sharing this more recently, that my mission at this point in my career is to retrieve, restore, protect, and preserve human consciousness. That's foundational to all of the work that I do. And so part of that mission is to teach people who they are, not just from their personalities, but who they are, like multidimensionally as well. And then help them integrate their multidimensional technologies and their healing modalities that have naturally developed, or they just have, and they can't explain them. And what do I do with this? And by the way, I'm an accountant in my day job. But by the way, the numbers talk to me. Or, but by the way, whatever it is, I have this weird thing that I can do that nobody else can do. And in the House of Sheology, that's where we bring in that integration of science and spirit and reason and intuition.
And I think, as you were talking, I was thinking of people that I know that they'll say, I just know.
Oh yeah.
I just know, like I did this and I just know, like you, and it's great because right now I think a lot of times people will talk about scaling their businesses and things like that. And they'll be asked like, well, you have to have a methodology, but you also have to have what are your standard operating procedures? And like this big chunk of, I just know. I just know.
And what I would argue is that here's the thing with those of us who are spiritually intelligent, the psychics, the oracles, is that unless we are diligently codifying, documenting, what we do is ephemeral. And I'm here to anchor in new consciousness and new ways of living and working and being, which requires some kind of physical something to represent it.
Yes.
Because when it is in the physical, it's undeniable.
Right. Do you think that plays because for you, coming from that kind of leaning in from the scientific side, right?
Yes.
You got your scientific backing behind that. I find that's so true for me too. Like when people see me and they meet me, they'll be like, you're not as woo-woo as I thought you would be. And I think that's a part of it.
It is. It's the strategy and the soul.
Yeah.
See, here's the mythology around people like you and me is that, oh, they're just airy-fairy and they're no. We are exceptional businesswomen. And we are exceptional at being able to bring things and land them on the spreadsheet too. We cannot be afraid of spreadsheets, people. Nope. We can't. But that's the thing that I think gets hidden or masked, that we see these people who are doing very well. I remember Sonia Choquette was one of my first teachers in the psychic arts. And I was like, how is she doing this? She's got this massive following, whatever. And it finally dawned on me, oh, she's a really good businesswoman.
Right.
And that is, I think the missing link is that acknowledgement that we have to be both.
1,000%. I know that's probably going to make your little science brain go crazy.
But no, I like that. It's good.
But I think, but that's the multidimensional piece of it too, right? That's speaking about the fact that, to me, I just call it the holistic part of us. Like there's so many fabrics and facets of who we are.
Yes.
And if we can elevate all of those, then we are doing exactly, for me, it's always coming back to like, what were you here to do? And as you said, it's like the human part of you, the humanity of who you are.
Yes.
And why you came at all.
Yeah.
Because there's certainly a ginormous, it's actually, the number that I had heard once was 1 in 400 quadrillion chance of the you that's sitting in front of me being here.
Yeah.
That is not an accident.
Nope.
That is 100% on purpose.
Yeah.
And so what is that
Given
about?
that,
what is that about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that the more we ground our spirituality and our gifts into our bodies, first of all, what I find too for the women who I work with is the more I have to satisfy their intellect enough. And I do that through the science of positive psychology. And we look at the research and the data that has been collected around consciousness and well-being and your word, the holistic healing aspects of it. And once they get that seems to anchor their intellect into a place where, okay, now I can go explore these gifts that I have. I can stay anchored here in the science of positive psychology. And also I can go out to the edges of consciousness and see what's out there. And create what's next.
Yeah, beautiful. And so Sheology is the playground with which you play. What are the things that your ideal participant?
Yeah.
It's so funny. I was like, not client. I'm like,
no, yeah.
Because it really does feel like energetically as you're talking about it, I feel like it is this playground.
Yeah.
Of getting to really, like you said, ground yourself, but also explore.
Yeah.
So what brings them to you? Where are they at before they find Sheology?
So the physicians, the attorneys, the financial advisors, that crew who are intellectually quite adept, who are very, very accomplished in their careers, and also have this native intuition that they're even subconsciously trying to figure out, how do I integrate all of this stuff? So they show up and they say, how do I do that? So that's one part of the crew that I talk to. A lot of them end up in my C-suite, and C stands for consciousness and channel and creativity.
Yes.
And it's like an executive roundtable, right? So I will perhaps have a topic, but everybody has a contribution to the conversation. So it's not me teaching, like I'm not one of those those kinds. I want to have the conversation, and also acknowledging that everybody has a different perspective and everyone has something to contribute energetically, intellectually, experientially, and so on. So that's the C-suite. And that's kind of the, that takes place in the House of Sheology. That's at the executive roundtable right there. And then I have also the writing club, and that's for those who are meant to be writing their stories, whether it's in teaching memoirs or in, just bringing through their technology, their healing technology in a way that is new for their field. So, for example, I've got a veterinarian in there who's also psychic and has conversations with the animals that she works with. And so we're looking at, like, how do we integrate that into some kind of package for her to be able to teach people about what she does and also share her gifts with the world. Then the other thing that I really love to do, because, we talk about being a business owner.
Right.
One of my gifts is premium sales. And, I've done in my work about I need my accountant to look at this, but I'm saying about 2.5 million in sales over the course of the work that I've done. And they've all been premium, private retreats, that kind of thing. So it's just a gift that I have. And I love to activate that in other women leaders, because your medicine was never meant to be billable. And when we look at the therapists and the psychologists and the counselors, and even the attorneys, anybody who's a service-based professional who has this billable kind of structure that they're living in,
Right.
it can feel very draining.
Yes.
And so what we look at with the premium programs is, like, how can we expand it to fit your medicine so that you can be all of yourself and you don't have to. I look back at me when I was doing therapy as a psychologist. It was like I was operating with one arm tied behind my back because I couldn't bring my whole self to it.
Yeah.
And so that's I love to talk about money and the psychology of money.
So I think that's a really good piece, because of course, the people that are following us now and listening to us, that if they're leaning into this conversation, if they found us here at Oracle on Purpose, chances are they are those people, right? Then in some way. And I think that's a big piece of it too, when we're like pulling in parts of our own genius, but also our own intuitive gifts, interweaving them outside of an old, outdated model.
Oh, for sure.
Right? And so it's like, that's the gap, right? The gap is, how, like, I love what you said earlier. You said, you think, I have this gift, I've got this arm behind my back, I've got this extra knowledge. How do I bill it? What do I tag it? What do I call it? And, for myself, I work with, in one particular real estate agent, a luxury agent, and she's a healer. And so for a long time, the integration part was, how do I be this? And how do I
love the real estate agents who are also healers. They do so much for the house and the land and the people.
Exactly.
And
I was like, here's the beauty of this. You keep saying, how do I be this and how do I be that? I'm like, you just be you.
Yeah.
Because being you is the thing that will make the biggest difference. And I think when we're trying to separate or to categorize or to, create silos in our lives.
Yeah, and that's when the money flows in, is the integration happens, and then the money has a really beautiful place to land.
Right. And I think it opens even that financial channel.
Yes.
Right. I think that's a thing to remember, is, like, as you said, like, the money piece is a financial channel.
Yes.
It is a flow of energy.
It is.
For sure.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's amazing. Thank you so much for being here on the show. Tell us one more time how people can find out about you.
I hang out on Instagram, Robyn McKay, PhD. I have the House of Sheology Facebook group, which is a fun place to hang out. And that's where I do a lot of the teaching on offering premium programs and things like that, as well as just anytime we have a new podcast launch, we sort of bring that into that conversation as well. And my podcast, Sheology by Dr. Robyn McKay.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
All right, everyone. Again, this is Oracle on Purpose podcast, and I am Leah Dunlap. So grateful that you're here watching us. Continue to come back and see us next time on the Oracle on Purpose podcast.